Halloween is a holiday that is observed on October 31st. In 2022, it will fall on a Monday. The custom has its roots in the ancient Celtic holiday of Samhain, when people would dress up and build bonfires to fend off ghosts. Pope Gregory III established November 1st as a day to celebrate All Saints in the 9th century. Soon, elements of Samhain's customs were absorbed into All Saints' Day. Before Halloween, the previous evening was referred to as All Hallows' Eve. Halloween has changed throughout the years to become a day filled with festivities like trick-or-treating, carving jack-o'-lanterns, festive get-togethers, dressing up, and enjoying sweets. The history of Halloween. Halloween's roots can be found in the historic Samhain festival of the Celts, pronounced Samhain. On November 1st, the Celts, who lived 2,000 years ago in a region that is today primarily Ireland, the United Kingdom, and northern France, celebrated the beginning of their new year. On this day, summer, harvest, and the gloomy, chilly winter, which was sometimes a season of fatalities for people, came to an end. The night before the new year, according to the Celts, the line separating the living from the dead became hazy. On the evening of October 31st, they observed Samhain, a time when it was thought that the spirits of the dead made a comeback to the planet. Celts believed that the presence of the supernatural spirits made it simpler for the Druids, or Celtic priests, to make future forecasts, in addition to causing difficulties and harming harvests. These forecasts served as a significant source of solace for people wholly reliant on the unpredictable natural environment during the long, dark winter. Druids constructed enormous sacred bonfires to serve as a reminder of the occasion, and people gathered around them to burn crops and animals as sacrifices to the Celtic gods. The Celts attempted to tell one another's fortunes while dressing up in costumes made typically of animal heads and skins. They relit their hearth fires, which they had put out earlier that evening, from the sacred bonfire after the festival was done in order to help safeguard them during the upcoming winter. Did you realize? Halloween purchases account for 25% of all sweets sold annually in the U.S. The majority of Celtic lands had been overrun by the Roman Empire by the year 43. Over the course of their 400-year reign over the Celtic nations, two Roman-inspired holidays were merged with the customary holiday of Samhain. The first was Feralia, a Roman rite that takes place in late October to remember the deceased. Pomona, the Roman goddess of fruit and trees, was celebrated on the second day. The apple is Pomona's emblem, therefore the fact that this celebration was included into Samhain probably explains why we still bop for apples on Halloween today. Colonial New England's strict Protestant religious beliefs severely restricted the Halloween festivities. In Maryland and the southern colonies, Halloween was considerably more common. A uniquely American interpretation of Halloween started to take shape when the beliefs and traditions of various European ethnic groups and American Indians converged. The first harvest festivities were play parties, which were open-air gatherings. Neighbors would sing and dance while exchanging ghost stories and fortunes. Did you realize? More individuals are purchasing pet costumes. In 2021, Americans spent about $500 million on pet costumes, more than double as much as they did in 2010. The telling of ghost stories and various forms of mischief were also a part of the traditional Halloween celebrations in the past. Annual autumn celebrations were widespread by the middle of the 19th century, although Halloween was not yet observed nationwide. America experienced a massive influx of new immigrants in the second half of the 19th century. These new arrivals, particularly the countless Irish who had fled the Irish potato famine, helped make Halloween a national holiday. By adapting European customs, Americans started dressing up for Halloween and knocking on doors to ask for food or money. This practice eventually developed into the modern-day trick-or-treat custom. Young girls thought that by performing tricks with yarn, apple parings, or mirrors on Halloween, they could predict the name or look of their future husband. In the late 1800s, there was a movement in America to change Halloween from a celebration of ghosts, tricks, and witchcraft to one that was more about neighborhood and community gatherings. Halloween parties for both kids and adults were the most popular way to commemorate the holiday at the turn of the century. Parties with games, seasonal delicacies, and festive attire. Newspapers and local authorities urged parents to remove anything scary or grotesque from Halloween celebrations. By the start of the 20th century, Halloween had mostly lost its superstitious and religious connotations as a result of these efforts. By the 1920s and 1930s, Halloween had evolved into a secular but neighborhood-focused celebration, with parades and Halloween parties serving as the main attractions. Vandalism started to affect some events in many areas at this time, despite the best efforts of many schools and towns. By the 1950s, local officials had successfully reduced vandalism, and Halloween had changed into a celebration mostly for kids. The birth boom of the 1950s produced a large number of small children, thus celebrations migrated from town municipal buildings to classrooms and homes where they could be accommodated more readily. Trick-or-treating, a centuries-old custom, was also revived between 1920 and 1950. Trick-or-treating was a relatively cheap way for an entire neighborhood to participate in the Halloween holiday. Families may theoretically stop tricks from being played on them by giving the neighborhood kids little presents. A fresh American custom was therefore established, and it has since flourished. With an estimated $6 billion in annual spending, Halloween is now the second largest commercial holiday in the United States, behind Christmas. Trick-or-treating on Halloween in America likely originated with early All Souls' Day parades in England. Poor people would beg for food during the festivities, and in exchange for their vow to pray for the family's deceased relatives, families would offer them treats called soul cakes. The church promoted the distribution of soul cakes as a replacement for the traditional custom of leaving food and wine out for wandering spirits. Children eventually adopted the custom of going a-souling, where they would visit the homes in their neighborhood and receive ale, food, and money. Halloween costume wear is a custom with both European and Celtic roots. Winter in those days was an ominous and frightening season. For the numerous people who were scared of the dark, food supplies frequently ran low, and the few winter days were filled with continual anxiety. People used to fear leaving their homes on Halloween since it was thought that ghosts returned to the physical world at that time. People would wear masks when they left their homes after dark so that the ghosts would believe them to be other ghosts in order to escape being recognized by these ghosts. In order to deter spirits from trying to enter homes on Halloween, people used to leave bowls of food outside. This would placate the ghosts and keep them away. But what about the Halloween customs and rituals that the trick-or-treaters of today have completely forgotten? Many of these outmoded rites have an emphasis on the present rather than the past and the living rather than the dead. Many of them, in particular, dealt with encouraging young women to find their future spouses and telling them that they would eventually be married, hopefully by next Halloween. On Halloween night, a matchmaking cook in 18th century Ireland may conceal a ring in her mashed potatoes in the hopes that the diner who found it would find true love. In Scotland, matchmakers advised young women to name a hazelnut for each potential suitor before throwing the nuts into the flames. According to the legend, the nut that burned to ashes instead of popping or exploding symbolized the girl's future husband. In certain iterations of this myth, the reverse was true. The burning nut represented a fleeting love. Another legend claimed that a young woman would dream of her future spouse if she consumed a sugary mixture comprised of walnuts, hazelnuts, and nutmeg before going to bed on Halloween night. Young girls tried to predict their futures by peering at egg yolks floating in a bowl of water, tossing apple peels over their shoulders in the hopes that the peels would fall to the ground in the shape of their future husband's initials, holding candles in front of mirrors in darkened rooms, and looking over their shoulders for their husbands' faces. Other ceremonies featured more rivalry. Occasionally, the first partygoer to find a burr while searching for chestnuts would also be the first to get hitched. Others would have the first successful apple bobber come down the aisle. Of all, each of these Halloween superstitions depends on the benevolence of the very same spirits whose presence the early Celts felt so deeply, whether we're seeking love counsel or hoping to ward off 7 years of bad luck. That was for today. Thank you for staying with us. Don't forget to like our video and subscribe to our channel.